There is a lie so ancient, so deeply woven into the fabric of your perception, that you don't even question it. You organize your life around it. You measure your worth by it. You celebrate it, mourn it, chase it, waste it, fear it. You call it time. But what if time, as you know it, doesn't exist? What if your hours, your years, your past, and your future are not truths, but illusions? Not reflections of reality, but distortions of it? What if time is not a river that flows, but a lens that bends? Not a linear track you're running on, but a mental cage you've been trained to live inside? We speak of time as if it were natural, like air or gravity. We say it passes, flies, runs out. But look closely, where is it? Can you touch it? Can you find it anywhere outside your mind? You can touch a clock. You can see the sun rise and fall. You can feel your body grow old. But none of these are time itself. They are movements, changes, cycles. And time is merely the name we gave to that rhythm. But naming something doesn't make it real. You were born into a world that taught you that time is fixed, external, and unstoppable. That you are bound by it, driven by it, and eventually destroyed by it. That you're either too young or too old, too early or too late. That the only place you can be is between what was and what might be. And so you live in the constant pressure of the ticking clock, running from regret, chasing a future that always slips through your fingers. But what if this entire framework is false? What if linear time is the spell mirrored and your true self exists outside it? This video is not just about time. It's about how time was weaponized against you. It's about how the modern world sliced reality into hours and minutes, divorced us from the sacred rhythms of nature, and taught us to fear the passage of life, instead of entering its mystery. It's about how you were conditioned to forget the eternal now, and how ancient wisdom, from Hermetic teachings to Eastern mysticism to shamanic time vision, still whispers that the present is not a moment, it is all of it. The past is not behind you, the future is not ahead, they're inside you, stacked like layers in a spiral of consciousness, and in the center, always, is now. In this video, we'll explore why your sense of time is distorted, who designed it that way, and why. How the ancient world saw time not as a line, but as a living intelligence. How quantum physics now agrees that time may not even be real, and how you can step out of the timeline and back into a truth. This is not a video to watch, it's an initiation, because once you see what time really is, you can never go back to being its prisoner. You'll begin to notice how it has shaped your identity, how it fuels your anxiety, how it traps your soul in false urgency. But more importantly, you'll begin to see how to break the spell. The great spiritual teachings didn't just tell you to be present for peace. They told you because presence is power. Because the now isn't just where life happens, it's where you happen. Right now, you are still dreaming in time. But when you wake up, you'll remember what eternity feels like. Not a place, not a future, but a return. Let's begin. What is time, really? Before we can dismantle an illusion, we must first understand what it claims to be. Ask a physicist and they'll tell you that time is a dimension, like space, woven into the fabric of the universe. A fourth axis, added to length, width, and depth. A coordinate through which matter moves, decay occurs, and entropy increases. They might even say that time is relative, not absolute, that it bends near massive bodies and stretches under velocity. But if you ask a child what time is, they won't give you equations. They'll say it's when the sun goes down, or when they get to play, or when their birthday comes. And that simple answer is, in many ways, closer to the truth than all the clocks and quantum models combined. Because time is not a thing. It is a perception, a felt rhythm, a story we tell ourselves about change, a structure we've agreed upon to make sense of a constantly shifting reality. You see, nothing in the natural world experiences time the way we do. Trees do not panic about getting older. Birds do not regret yesterday's songs. The moon does not worry about its next phase. Time, as humans experience it, is not just about the passing of events, and it's about how we interpret that passage. It's not the fire that burns the candle. It's the story we tell about the flame. But let's step back. In our everyday lives, we treat time as a constant. Something that moves uniformly, forward, unchanging. Seconds ticking into minutes, minutes into hours, days into years. A march, steady and irreversible. We build our lives around calendars and clocks. We label people by their age. We speak of being on time, or running out of time, as if time were something external that we must catch up with. But even modern science tells a very different story. Einstein shattered the idea of absolute time. He showed that time is relative, that it moves slower near massive objects and faster when you move rapidly, that a person traveling near the speed of light will age differently than someone standing still. That time is not a fixed river, but a malleable dimension, warped by gravity and motion. Quantum mechanics complicates the picture even further. In the quantum world, particles do not obey a simple arrow of time. Events can be entangled across time. Cause and effect blur. And in some interpretations, time itself may emerge from a deeper, timeless layer of reality. In fact, many physicists now entertain the possibility that time, as we know it, might not even be fundamental, that it could be an emergent property of something more primary, more mysterious, like space, like consciousness. And yet, despite this, we live as if time is real, absolute, measurable, inescapable. But what are we actually measuring? What does it mean to say 1 minute has passed? In truth, we're not measuring time itself. We're measuring Kreiskom on change. The movement of the hands on a clock, the shifting position of the sun, the decay of radioactive atoms, the beating of a heart, the flickering of attention. Time is a map drawn over motion, not the motion itself. A clock doesn't show you time. It shows you a system of symbols, 12 numbers arranged in a circle, with arms that rotate at regular intervals. But those symbols only mean something because we gave them meaning. Time is not the numbers. It is not the movement. It is the mental frame we place upon the movement. In this way, time is a story, a myth we live inside, collectively agreed upon for the sake of coordination, productivity, survival. But all myths, even useful ones, can become prisons when we forget they are myths. And perhaps this is where the great confusion began. The moment we stopped using time as a tool and began letting it define our identity. You are not born with a sense of time. As an infant, you live entirely in the present, fully immersed in sensation, untouched by the past, unconcerned with the future. There is only now, hunger now, love now, light now, sound now. But slowly, as language forms and society imprints itself upon you, you begin to internalize time. You learn to separate moments, to name them, to fear their loss, to wait for better ones, to long for those already gone. And in that process, you begin to believe that you are moving through time, like a train on a track. But what if it's not you who moves through time? What if it's time that moves through you? Why? What if the past is not behind you but inside your memory? What if the future is not ahead of you, but a projection of your imagination? What if the only thing that ever truly exists is the present awareness that holds both? The spiritual traditions of the world, far older than clocks or chronometers, knew this. They saw time not as linear, but as cyclical. Not as an arrow, but as a spiral. Not as a ruler, but as a mystery. The ancients watched the stars and noticed patterns. The sun returned, the moon changed, the seasons cycled. They saw the great wheel turning, not forward, but around and around, like a dance, like a breath. Time to them was sacred. a rhythm of life, death, and rebirth, a ceremony of becoming. But we replaced that mystery with measurement. We built clocks to regulate the day. We carved calendars into stone. We chopped eternity into boxes and grids. We made time a commodity. And in doing so, we began to trade our presence for productivity. We stopped asking, "What is this moment asking of me?" and started asking, "What time is it?" And now we live haunted by the hour, afraid of being late, afraid of wasting time, afraid of running out. But here's the truth. You cannot waste what does not belong to you. You cannot run out of what was never yours to begin with. You are not a slave to time. You are a vessel of consciousness, and consciousness is not bound by clocks. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore how this illusion of time was constructed, historically, politically, and spiritually. We'll dive into how it became a system of control, a source of suffering, and a veil over our true nature. And we'll begin to uncover what it truly means to live in the eternal now, the place where time dissolves and eternity remembers itself through you. But before we can escape the time trap, we must see it for what it is. Not a law, not a truth, but a lens that you can learn to set down. And when you do, you won't just experience more presence. You'll remember who you are, not a creature of time, but a child of eternity. Time in its purest sense may be an illusion. But the way we experience it today, structured, measured, scheduled, is not just an illusion. It is an invention, a human construction, a tool forged in the hands of those who sought to shape the rhythms of life into something predictable, controllable, and profitable. And like all tools, it has a history, one that tells us more about power than it does about the cosmos. Long before we had clocks and calendars, we lived by the sun and the stars. The rhythm of nature was our guide. We rose with the light, we slept with the dark. We planted with the seasons, we harvested with the moon. Our time was sacred because it was shared with the earth, the sky, the tides, the breath of all living things. But something changed. As civilizations grew more complex, the need for coordination expanded. Empires needed armies to march in unison. Cities needed markets to open and close. Religions needed feast days and fast days. And so time began to be carved into symbols, not just observed, but imposed. Calendars were among the first instruments of temporal control. The Mayans built intricate systems that linked celestial cycles to spiritual understanding. The Egyptians tracked the flooding of the Nile with remarkable precision, but these were still connected to the sky, to nature, to mystery. Then came Rome. The Julian calendar, named after Julius Caesar, imposed a system of 12 months and 365 days. It was political, it was administrative, and it was flawed. So flawed that centuries later, Pope Gregory XIII would correct it, giving us the Gregorian calendar most of the world uses today. But these reforms were not just about keeping the seasons aligned. They were about power. When the Church fixed the date of Easter, it wasn't just marking a holy day. It was claiming authority over time itself. And with every reform, every decree, a new layer of artificial structure was laid over the natural world. Still, calendars were just the beginning. The real transformation, the one that truly reshaped human consciousness, came with the clock. In the monasteries of medieval Europe, time was first divided not by the sky, but by the bell. Monks used bells to call each other to prayer at specific hours. These hours were not equal. They changed with the seasons. But over time, they became standardized. And then came the mechanical clock. In the 14th century, the first public clocks began to appear in town squares. They did not tell minutes or seconds, only hours. But that was enough. Suddenly, life began to tick. Not in waves, not in spirals, but in steps. Tick, tock, do this, then this, then this. What had once been fluid became rigid. The sacred dance of time became a march. By the 17th century, clocks were everywhere. factories, schools, cities. And with the Industrial Revolution, the clock became king. Now time was money. Productivity was measured in hours. People were paid not for what they created, but for how long they labored. The natural rhythms of the body, hunger, rest, inspiration, were ignored in favor of the schedule. A new god had arrived, and it did not forgive lateness. This mechanization of time created a profound shift in human identity. No longer were we beings in relationship with the cosmos. We became units, cogs, workers. Time was no longer a mystery. It was a grid, a cage, and we learned to love the cage. We began to take pride in being on time. We judged lateness as laziness. We called wasting time a sin. We began to believe that time itself was a resource, something we owned, something we could lose. But time, as we've seen, was never ours to begin with. It is not a currency. It is not a commodity. It is a concept, one that has been shaped and sharpened into an instrument of discipline. Michel Foucault, the French philosopher, spoke of the ways power operates not through violence but through structures, schedules, timetables, routines. And indeed, what better way to control a population than to control their time? If you can dictate when someone wakes up, when they eat, when they work, when they rest, you don't need to control their thoughts. You've already shaped their world, and this shaping begins early. From childhood, we are trained to obey the clock, to sit still at 9 a.m., to eat at noon, to finish tasks by 5, to sleep by 10. And if we don't, we're called irresponsible, undisciplined, unproductive. But what if the real discipline is the one time exerts over us? What if our obsession with productivity is not a sign of strength, but of conditioning? What if we've been trained to measure our worth by output, because someone, somewhere, decided that human energy should serve systems, not souls? And what if the deepest cost of this invention is not stress or burnout or deadlines, but the loss of presence? Because when you are always looking at the next hour, the next meeting, the next goal, you are never fully here. And when you are never here, you are nowhere. The invention of time was not just about clocks. It was about control. Control over crops, control over people, control over thought. But we are beginning to remember. We are beginning to sense that there is something false about this structure, that there is something sacred we lost when we traded the moon for a wristwatch. And so the question becomes, can we reclaim time? Not by destroying the clock, but by seeing through it. Can we return to the rhythm of being, to the spiral of becoming, to the presence that precedes all hours? Because if time was invented, it can be reimagined. And what you are about to discover is that beyond the ticking, beyond the calendar, beyond the years, there is a place outside of time, and it's been waiting for you to remember. Before clocks divided our days and calendars dictated our lives, there was a different understanding of time, one not carved by machinery or bureaucracy, but breathed by the cosmos itself. To the ancient mind, time was not a ruler. It was a rhythm, a pulse, a presence, something sacred, living, and deeply intertwined with the mystery of existence. They did not ask, what time is it? They asked, where in the cycle are we? Not what hour is it, but what is this moment asking of us? In Egypt, time was not linear, it was dual. The Egyptians had two primary concepts of time, Zep-Tepi and Nehe. Zep-Tepi was the first time, the mythic, eternal moment of creation. It was not a historical event, but a timeless origin. The moment when the world was brought into being by divine forces. And every ritual, every sacred act was a way of returning to that first time, to make the present sacred by aligning it with the eternal. Nehe, on the other hand, referred to cyclical time, the rhythm of the sun, the seasons, the festivals, the life-death-rebirth cycle of Osiris and nature. Time was not something to be escaped or endured. It was to be honored and participated in. The Egyptian temple was not just a place of worship. It was a portal between times, a place where the eternal and the temporal overlapped. In their rituals, they were not commemorating events of the past. They were re-entering them. Every rite was a reactivation of sacred time, a reset, a reunion with the divine. To live in harmony with time for the ancient Egyptian meant to be aligned with Kant Ma'at, the cosmic order, the balance, the right rhythm of life. When this rhythm was disrupted by injustice, greed, or forgetfulness, chaos followed. Thousands of miles away, the ancient Vedic seers of India saw time through yet another lens. In Sanskrit, the word for time is kala, and it is not just a neutral dimension. Kala is a deity. Time is personified as both creator and destroyer. It births worlds, and it devours them. It is the cosmic dancer that spins galaxies into being and dissolves them back into silence. The Vedic tradition speaks of vast cosmic cycles, yugas, that span tens of thousands, even millions of years, ages of light and darkness, periods of spiritual awakening and decline. Each cycle not simply a repetition, but a spiral, an evolution through recurrence. We are not merely progressing, we are circling higher or lower, depending on our consciousness. The ancient Indians also emphasized the now, the eternal present, known as Sat, the only reality. The rest, the past and future, are considered Maya's illusion, not because they don't seem real, but because they distract from the truth that only now exists. In their deepest meditations, the rishis accessed states where time disappeared, where the mind dissolved, where the timeless self, the Atman, was experienced directly, not as a body or a name or a story in time, but as pure being. And then, there were the Mayans. To them, time was not a line or a number. It was a being. Each day had its own spirit, its own purpose, its own energy. Their calendars were not merely tools for scheduling. They were cosmic maps. Layered, multidimensional systems that revealed the unfolding of consciousness through cycles within cycles. The Mayan long count calendar, famously misunderstood in 2012, was not predicting an apocalypse. It marked the end of one great cycle and the beginning of another. Time, to them, was regenerative. It did not end. It transformed. They also had the Tzolk'in, a 260-day calendar based on the human gestation cycle. It linked cosmic time with the rhythms of life and birth. Every day was a unique energetic code, a vibrational fingerprint. To be born on a certain day meant something. It was not arbitrary. It was initiation. To live in tune with time was to live in tune with your purpose. In the Andes, among the Inca, time was also seen as sacred space. They believed in Pacha, a word that meant both time and space simultaneously. Pacha was not just when, but where. The world was not split into clock and ground. It was a living field of sacred presence. And even in the Christian mystical tradition, we see echoes of this. In the New Testament, two Greek words for time appear: chronos and kairos. Chronos is the clock, measurable, sequential time. Kairos is divine time, the opportune moment, the sacred now when heaven touches earth. Jesus speaks of kairos when he says, "The time is fulfilled and the kingdom is at hand." It is not about chronology. It is about transformation. Mystics throughout Christian history spoke of stepping outside of time, of contemplative states where past and future vanish and only the divine remains. Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Meister Eckhart, they all tasted timelessness in their union with the eternal. Even indigenous shamanic cultures, from the Amazon to Australia, have long understood time not as linear, but as dreamlike. For many, time flows like a river that bends back on itself. The ancestors are not in the past. They are here, now, listening, speaking through symbols, visions, synchronicities. The dream time of the Aboriginal peoples is not a myth. It is the timeless reality that underlies this one. And perhaps the deepest thread through all these traditions is this: time is not fixed. It is layered, it is alive, it is a mirror, and you are its reflection. The ancients did not seek to escape time, they sought to enter it fully, to dance with it, to honor its cycles, to dissolve the ego in its spirals, and to awaken to the truth that behind all its movement, there is stillness. A stillness that is not empty, but eternal. A presence that is not passive, but powerful. And now that is not a sliver between past and future, but the totality of existence waiting to be remembered. We, in forgetting this, have not just lost a philosophy. We have lost a way of being. When we flatten time into lines and digits, we also flatten the soul. But the ancient memory still lives, in symbols, in dreams, in your breath, in that feeling, quiet but persistent, that something is not right with the clock, that there is more, not later, not before, but now. And in the next chapter, we will explore how that illusion of past and future, that thin thread we walk called linear time, is perhaps the most convincing trick of all. Because when you believe that your freedom is somewhere ahead, you never realize that it was always right here. There is a spell so powerful, so convincing that it shapes your identity, dictates your emotions, and defines your entire sense of reality. All without you even noticing it. It's the illusion of the timeline. You see it everywhere, on charts, on calendars, on school walls. A simple line, moving from left to right, a beginning, a middle, an end. You're born, you live, you die. Time marches forward. This is what we're taught, and so we organize our memories into a past. We project our hopes into a future, and we try to hold on desperately to a fleeting present that we can barely touch before it slips away. But what if this entire model is wrong? What if the line was never there? What if past, present, and future are not separate, but simultaneous? What if you've been conditioned to divide eternity into fragments and then live inside one fragment at a time? Let's begin with the past. You think of it as fixed, immutable, gone. But is it? Every time you remember something, your brain doesn't replay a recording, it reconstructs in the memory. And in doing so, it alters it. Science has shown that our memories are not archives. They're living, breathing recreations. Each time we recall the past, we reshape it. We color it with who we are now. We edit it, even unconsciously. And then we believe that version as truth. The past, then, is not something you carry. It's something you create, over and over. And the future? The future does not exist. It is a projection, a mental film made of expectation, imagination, and fear. You can make plans, yes. You can dream. You can anticipate. But none of that is real, because the future never arrives. It is always just a story, suspended ahead of you like a mirage. And when it does arrive, it's no longer the future. It's now. So if the past is a reconstruction and the future is a projection, what is the present? We often think of the present as a razor-thin slice between what has happened and what is coming. But the present is not a point. It is all there is. The now is not the midpoint of a timeline. It is the field in which time appears. It is the canvas, the stage, the stillness beneath the movement. The idea of a past and future is a function of the memory and anticipation, both of which occur now. The feelings you have about the past, they arise now. The anxiety you have about the future, it's happening now. You have never actually experienced the past. You have only ever experienced memories, which are present moment mental phenomena. You have never actually visited the future. You have only imagined it, here, in the present. You don't live in time. You live in awareness. And awareness does not move. It watches movement. It holds time, like the ocean holds the waves. But something in us resists this truth. We cling to the past because it gives us identity. We chase the future because it promises salvation. We fear the present because it demands surrender. To live in the now feels like death to the ego, because the ego is a creature of time. It is built from memories, hopes, and fears. It is the story of me stretched across a timeline. Without the line, who are you? This is why silence feels threatening, why stillness makes us restless. Because in those moments when time seems to stop, the story dissolves, and something deeper begins to surface. This is also why we seek time in everything. We ask, how long will this take? When will I be ready? What happens next? We are addicted to sequence. But the soul does not live in sequence. It lives in presence. And the present is not just a moment. It is a dimension. It is the place where all moments meet. In mystical experiences, time often collapses. People speak of entering a state where hours feel like minutes or minutes feel like lifetimes, where memory floods the now and visions of the future arrive like déjà vu, where linearity dissolves and everything feels connected. These are not hallucinations, they are glimpses of what's always been true. That time is not the foundation of reality, but a layer, and that behind that layer, everything is happening at once. The physicist David Bohm spoke of the implicate order, a hidden underlying reality where all things are unfolded together. In that order, time is not linear. It is holographic. Every part contains the whole. In the same way, your deepest self is not traveling through time. It is holding time. You are not a passenger on the train. You are the space in which the train appears. But we've been so thoroughly trained to live on the line that stepping off it feels disorienting, even dangerous. We ask, if I don't hold on to the past, who will I be? If I don't plan for the future, how will I survive? But this is the paradox. Only by stepping out of time can you see it clearly. Only by letting go of the line can you see the circle. Only by releasing the story can you meet the truth. The grand illusion is not just that time exists. It's that you are separate from it, that you move through it, that you are bound by it. But the ancient wisdom and the deepest spiritual teachings say otherwise. They tell us that you are not in time. Time is in you. And once you remember this, the prison of the timeline begins to crack. You no longer need to fix the past. You no longer need to control the future. You only need to be fully here because all power, all healing, all transformation happens here. The line is an illusion. The now is reality. And in the next chapter, we will enter that now more fully, exploring what it means to live beyond the ticking of the clock, beyond the fragments of memory and desire, into the eternal living presence that has been waiting, patiently, behind every breath, because eternity is not far away. It is simply what remains when time disappears. There is a place where time does not exist. Not because it's too fast to notice, not because it's paused, but because it was never real to begin with. That place is here, and it is always now. Not the now we speak of casually, as in now it's 3 p.m. Not the now that sits like a fragile slice between past and future, but the now that is eternal. The now that holds all moments. The now that is not a fragment in time, but the container of time. This now is not a concept. It is not something you can measure, describe, or locate on a clock. It is something you marmar. It is the ground of your being. And yet, most people spend their entire lives exiled from it. We live in our minds, jumping from memories to plans, from regret to anticipation. We construct timelines, chase goals, relive conversations, rehearse what we'll say next. We live in a trance of elsewhere. But when we stop, when we truly stop, something miraculous begins to emerge. Have you ever watched a sunset and forgotten what day it was? Have you ever been so present in a conversation, a song, a moment of silence, that all your worries seemed to dissolve? That was the now. You weren't in the moment. You were the moment. The sense of separation collapsed, and for a brief flicker, eternity opened its eyes. This is not poetry. It is a state of consciousness. The now is not a moment in time. It is a field of awareness beneath time. It is the space in which everything arises. Thoughts come and go, emotions rise and fall, the body ages, the seasons change, but the now remains, untouched. The mystics of every tradition have pointed to this. In Zen, they speak of suchness, the direct immediate reality of now. In Vedanta they call it Sat, pure being beyond thought. In Sufism, it is the heart's awareness, ever present, always in contact with the divine. Even in Christianity, Jesus says, "Before Abraham was, I am." Not I was, but I am. An eternal present, outside chronology. This presence is not passive. It is not numb. It is vivid, alert, awake. When you are truly present, the world becomes luminous. Not because the world has changed, but because you have stepped out of the distortion of time. Colors deepen, sounds sharpen, your breath becomes a sacred movement. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. Why? Because in the now, you are not projecting meaning. You are receiving it, directly, without filters, without the mind's commentary. But here's the paradox. The now cannot be reached, because you never left it. You don't need to attain presence. You need only to notice where your attention has gone. You need only to let go of the past, the future, the story. Presence is not something you do. It's what remains when you stop doing. And yet, this is perhaps the most difficult practice of all, because everything in your conditioning pulls you out of the now. We're trained to live for what's next, to believe that happiness is always one step away, one goal, one achievement, one healing, one realization. This is the great lie, that you are incomplete here, that salvation is scheduled, that truth lives on the horizon. But the eternal now whispers a different message. You are already whole. You are already home. You are already here. The now contains your past, as memory, arising in this moment. It contains your future, as vision, dream, possibility. It contains the present, not as a point, but as a living field of unfolding being. When you rest in this now, something strange begins to happen. Time softens, urgency dissolves, fear loses its grip. You begin to experience a new rhythm, one not dictated by minutes or deadlines, but by intuition, inspiration, and flow. You begin to trust life again. Not because you know what will happen, but because you are finally in contact with what isn't happening. The now is not safe. It will not protect you from pain or change, but it will give you the strength to meet them. Because in the now, you are not identified with the wave. You are the ocean. You are not the thought. You are the awareness behind it. You are not the story. You are the stillness in which the story appears. And this stillness is not empty. It is sacred. It is where God lives. Where the universe breathes, where your soul remembers what it truly is. And this remembering is not a process of learning. It is a falling away of illusion. The illusion of linearity, the illusion of separation, the illusion of time. When time disappears, you don't vanish. You arrive, fully, radiantly, now. And from this place, from this presence, you begin to live differently. You are no longer ruled by the clock. You no longer measure yourself by what you've done or what you'll become. You begin to live not for outcomes but for alignment. You listen more, you rush less, you breathe deeper, you respond instead of react. You begin to feel the pulse of the divine in the simplest of things. A hand on your chest, the sound of rain, the space between two words. And slowly the sacred re-enters your life. Not because it was absent, but because your attention has returned. The now is not a technique. It is not a trend. It is the only place where life actually happens. And it is where freedom begins, because when you are fully present, you are no longer a victim of time. You are no longer driven by fear. You are no longer waiting. You are simply here. And here is enough. In the next chapter, we will examine what stands in the way of this presence, how time has been weaponized to enslave our minds, trap our hearts, and distract our souls. Because if the now is the key to liberation, then the illusion of time is the architecture of bondage. And to see it clearly, we must first understand how we were trapped. You weren't born in time. You were born in presence. You didn't arrive with a sense of schedule, an obsession with hours, or a fear of growing older. You arrived as being itself, immersed in experience, guided by sensation, untouched by measurement. And then, slowly, you were taught to obey the clock. Not just the physical clock that ticks on the wall, but the inner clock, the one that whispers, "You're late. You're behind. You should be further along by now." This is the voice of the time trap, and once it enters your mind, it rarely leaves on its own. It doesn't yell, it murmurs. It weaves itself into your language, your emotions, your self-image. It becomes so familiar that you stop questioning it. You think it's you, but it's not. It is the internalized voice of a system that values production over presence, speed over depth, growth over wisdom. This trap begins early. As a child, you are taught to follow routines, to be punctual, to finish tasks within arbitrary deadlines. Your success is measured not by your curiosity or joy, but by your ability to perform within timeframes. You learn to feel guilty for resting. You learn to feel ashamed for being slow. You learn to fear wasting time, as if time were a possession you must protect at all costs. And so, you begin to fragment. You stop listening to your body. You ignore your inner rhythms. You override fatigue, inspiration, hunger, silence, all in service of the schedule. This is the first layer of the trap, disconnection. You become cut off from the present and from yourself. You live in your head, calculating, anticipating, regretting. And then another layer is added, comparison. You are told that your timeline should match others, that by a certain age, you should achieve this, that by this date, you should have that. That you are only valuable if your life aligns with a linear script. If you fall behind, you are a failure. If you get ahead, you are still anxious, because now you must maintain the lead. Either way, your worth is never secure, because your worth has been tied to a timeline that was never yours. And yet we accept this. We organize our lives by these invisible bars. We wear watches like shackles. We divide our days into to-do lists. We chase the weekend as if it's freedom. We fear Monday as if it's punishment. We have confused motion with meaning. We have confused urgency with importance. We have confused the ticking of a clock with the unfolding of a life. But the deepest layer of the trap is this: identity. We don't just live in time. We become it. We define ourselves by our past, our traumas, our titles, our timelines. We build stories around what happened, and we wear them like armor. We fear the future, and so we try to control it. We make plans not from vision but from fear of the unknown. And in doing so, we forget who we are without the story. Because without the past, who would you be? Without the future, what would you hope for? Without the schedule, what would you do right now? The time trap is so effective because it's invisible. You don't see bars, you feel them, as anxiety, restlessness, guilt. You don't hear orders, you repeat them to yourself. I should be doing more. I don't have enough time. I'm behind. And yet behind what? This is the cruel genius of the trap. There is no real standard. The goalposts always move. The more you chase time, the more it eludes you. You can't win a race against an illusion. But here's the secret. The trap only works if you believe the voice. If you believe that your value is tied to time, if you believe that your path must follow a line, if you believe that your worth depends on what you produce within a schedule. But it doesn't. You are not a machine. You are not a calendar. You are not a to-do list. You are awareness. You are presence. You are a moment of eternity unfolding through a human life. And you were never meant to live this way. You were not meant to wake up tired, race through hours, collapse into sleep and repeat. You were not meant to fear birthdays. You were not meant to sacrifice your body and soul for deadlines. You were meant to live in rhythm, to create from inspiration, to rest without guilt, to move in harmony with your own season. But in a world that worships time, rest looks like laziness. Presence looks like passivity. Stillness looks like failure. And so we keep moving, not because we're alive, but because we're afraid to stop. Because if we stop, the silence returns. And in the silence, we meet the truth. That we've built our lives around a lie. That the real prison was never time, but our relationship to it. And yet, there is a way out. Not by destroying the clock. Not by rejecting structure, but by remembering what time is and what it isn't. Time is a tool. It is not your master. It is a coordinate, not a commandment. It is a symbol, not a sentence. You can still use time, but stop letting it use you. Because until you step out of the trap, you will live in exile from your own life. And life, real life, only happens now. The doorway to freedom is always open, but you must be willing to leave the timeline behind. Not to erase it, but to see through it. To remember that your value was never in what you did, but in who you are. And who you are was never bound by time. In the next chapter, we will explore how to walk through that doorway, not as an idea, but as a practice. Because presence is not a theory, it is a lived reality. And there are ways, ancient, mystical, and deeply human, to return to it, to live outside the trap, to move in sacred rhythm, to awaken, not someday, but now. If time is an illusion, and the timeline a trap, then presence is the escape hatch. But presence is not simply a mindset. It is not a motivational phrase or a mental trick. It is a state of being that requires remembrance, and that remembrance begins with practice. Because the illusion of time is not just philosophical, it is physiological. It is imprinted in the body. It lives in your nervous system. It rides the waves of adrenaline, cortisol, distraction, and thought loops that form the background noise of your waking life. To dissolve the illusion of time, you must train yourself to return, again and again, to the now. Not as a concept, but as a lived, felt, embodied experience. The ancients understood this. They didn't just speak about timelessness, they practiced their way into it. They built temples not just of stone, but of silence. They created rituals not to mark time, but to collapse it. They moved their bodies in rhythm not to exercise, but to entrain consciousness with the eternal. Because time is not dissolved by thinking, it is dissolved by presence. Let us begin with the most accessible gateway, the breath. Breath is the original clock. It is the sacred metronome that keeps rhythm between body and soul. It is always happening now, and because of that, it is always pointing home. When you bring awareness to the breath, not to control it, but to witness it, something subtle begins to shift. Thought slows, the edges of the mind soften, the sense of rushing loosens its grip. In traditions around the world, breath is seen as sacred. In Sanskrit, prana. In Chinese, qi. In Hawaiian, ha. In Hebrew, ruach. In Greek, pneuma. All of these words mean not just breath, but spirit, life force. And when you reconnect to breath, you reconnect to the timeless source of your being. Try it now. Feel the inhale arrive. Feel the exhale leave. Notice that neither is in the past or future. They are now, and so are you. From breath we move to stillness. Stillness is the counterspell to urgency. It is the space where time loses its momentum. It is not the absence of activity, it is the presence of awareness. Stillness is not always quiet. It can occur in the middle of noise. What matters is the inner pause, the letting go of striving, of becoming, of seeking something more. In that pause, the veil of time begins to thin, and presence steps forward. Meditation is one way to cultivate this, not as a task, but as a return, not to achieve enlightenment, but to rest in what already is. In true meditation, you are not trying to stop your thoughts, you are simply not chasing them. You let them pass like clouds, and in the space between them, you begin to feel it. That eternal silence, pulsing beneath all things. But stillness is not only inward. There are also practices of sacred movement, designed not to escape the body, but to bring the body into timeless flow. In Qigong, in Sufi whirling, in certain forms of sacred dance, the body becomes an instrument through which the divine rhythm plays. These movements are not rushed. They are circular, spiraling, slow. They echo the patterns of nature, the moon's phases, the serpent's coil, the galaxy's turn. And as the body enters these rhythms, so does the mind. Time dissolves. The dancer becomes the dance, the breath becomes the wind, the moment expands. These are not metaphors, they are technologies of presence. Sound is another portal. Chanting, mantra, overtone singing, the striking of a bell, these are not simply aesthetic. They are vibrational anchors. They create resonance between inner and outer, between thought and spirit. In the Vedic tradition, chanting Om is not about repetition. It is about aligning with the primordial vibration of existence. Om is the soundless sound, the pulse behind time. In Sufism, the practice of dhikr, the repetition of divine names, is a spiral of remembrance. Each repetition draws the seeker deeper into the present until the seeker disappears and only the name remains. In the Christian mystical tradition, the Jesus prayer functions similarly, a quiet rhythm that replaces thought with sacred vibration. In all cases, sound is used not to fill space, but to open it. But there is another key, one often overlooked: attention. Attention is the currency of presence. Where your attention goes, reality follows. If your attention is scattered across timelines, regrets, fantasies, projections, then so is your experience of life. But when attention is gathered, focused, undivided, something opens. You begin to see things as they are, not through the lens of expectation or memory, but in their raw, living essence. You taste food more deeply. You hear music more fully. You feel your own presence as a living force. Attention is a discipline. It is the practice of returning to breath, to body, to now. And this return, over time, becomes natural, effortless. You begin to live from presence, to speak from it, to move from it, to love from it. Even mundane moments become luminous. Washing a dish, walking, listening, sitting in sunlight. Each one becomes a doorway, not to somewhere else, but to right here. Presence is not only cultivated in silence, it is also found in devotion. When your heart is fully engaged, in prayer, in art, in service, time slips away. Have you noticed this? When you are truly in love, time vanishes. When you are creating from the soul, hours pass like minutes. When you are weeping with grief or laughing in ecstasy, there is no time. Why? Because in those moments, you are not trying to manage life. You are meeting it. And in that meeting, the clock is irrelevant. You become timeless because you are in contact with the eternal. This is why presence is sacred, not because it is peaceful, but because it is real. The practices are not ends in themselves. They are invitations. They are reminders. They are ways to return to what never left, to the now, to the soul, to the space beyond time where your true self waits, not in the future, but always, patiently, here. And perhaps the most beautiful truth of all is this: you don't need to master these practices. You don't need to get them perfect. You only need to remember, over and over, until remembering becomes your way of being. Presence is not a task. It is a homecoming. And every moment you return is a moment reclaimed from the illusion. You are not here to beat time. You are here to transcend it. And in the next and final chapter, we will remember what this all points to. That time was never your enemy. It was your teacher. And now that the lesson is complete, you are free to live not in time but in truth. What if you never moved through time, but time moved through you? What if the past, the future, and even the present as you've known it were not separate places, but expressions of your own awareness, appearing and disappearing like waves in the ocean of your being? This journey we've taken, through illusion, through memory, through the mechanisms and myths of time, has not been about answers. It's been about undoing something. Something so deep, so invisible that it shaped your very sense of self. The spell is subtle. It told you to look backward to understand who you are. It told you to look forward to discover your purpose. It told you to wait, to hurry, to be late. It told you there's never enough time, or that time would heal all wounds, or that one day, just maybe, you'd finally arrive. But you are already here, and this here, this now, is not just a temporary stop between two eternities. It is the eternity itself, revealing itself through you. You are not a prisoner of time. You are its creator. You are the observer in which time appears, dances, dissolves. All the years you spent trying to catch up, all the hours you feared were lost, all the deadlines and timelines and invisible clocks you obeyed, were never greater than you. They were never separate from you. They were never the truth. The truth was simpler, more radical, and more ancient. You are not in time. Time is in you, like a dream held within a sleeper, like a painting inside an artist's mind, like a river inside the stillness of a mountain. And once you realize this, nothing remains the same. You don't stop aging, but you stop fearing age. You don't stop planning, but you no longer need the future to define you. You don't erase the past, but you no longer let it haunt you. You walk with time instead of running from it. You honor the rhythms, but you are no longer enslaved by them. You breathe deeper, because the moment no longer slips through your fingers. It expands in your awareness. Time was never a chain. It was a rhythm, waiting to be danced. It was a spiral, waiting to be entered. It was a mirror, waiting for you to remember who you are beyond reflection. And who are you? You are presence. You are stillness in motion. You are the breath before time begins. You are the witness of the rising sun, the falling leaf, the cry of birth, the silence of death. And all of it happens inside you. When you truly see this, you become unhurried. Not because you've renounced the world, but because you've remembered that you were never late to begin with. Every moment is the first. Every step is arrival. Every breath is the beginning of the universe. And in this timeless state, something else begins to bloom. Gratitude. Not for the things you have, but for the being that you are. Not for the minutes you've managed to save, but for the miracle that any of this exists at all. This is what the mystics meant when they said, eternity is not a long time. Eternity is now. Now is not empty. Now is not waiting. Now is not a means to an end. Now is the end. And the beginning. And the return. You have not missed your life. You have only stepped away from it. But now, as your awareness returns, as the dream of time fades and the truth of presence brightens, you begin to see clearly, not with your eyes, but with your soul. And your soul is not on a clock. It is not aging. It is not rushing. It is not afraid. It is remembering. And that remembering is the awakening we call liberation. So breathe. Look around. Feel the weight of this moment, not as a burden, but as a blessing. You are here, and this here is vast. It contains every possibility. It contains the healing you longed for in the past. It contains the power you hope to find in the future. It contains the one thing you were always searching for, yourself. Not as a story, but as presence. Not as a timeline, but as truth. Not as a becoming, but as being. This is the secret the ancients guarded, the treasure buried not in the earth, but in awareness. And now you have found it. Let it change you, not with force, but with softness. Let it guide your steps, your choices, your presence. And if this message touched something in you, something ancient, quiet, powerful, then let this not be the end. Let it be the return. Return to yourself. Return to presence. Return to the now. And if you wish to walk further on this path, to explore the mysteries that live beyond illusion, and to uncover the forgotten wisdom that calls to the soul, you are not alone. This channel is a sanctuary for seekers like you, and we walk together. So subscribe, like the video, leave a comment and tell us what this stirred in your heart. And when you're ready for the next initiation, let the next video choose you. Time cannot touch you anymore, because you've remembered the truth. You are not in time. Time is in you, and now you are free.